And we can get started. I'm going to start the webinar and mute myself, and then we're good to go from there. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the February Lunchtime Lecture. Our guest today is Sherri Greenberg, a professor of practice and fellow of the Max Sherman Chair in State and Local Government at the LBJ School of Public Affairs. She is also the graduate advisor for the LBJ School Master of Public Affairs program. Her teaching and research interests include technology policy, urban and state issues, public engagement, housing, transportation, healthcare, public finance, campaigns, and elections. In addition to her academic work, she is a sought-after media commentator, event speaker, and contributor to legislative testimony. She served as a senior advisor to Austin Mayor Steve Adler and was a Texas State Representative from 1991 to 2001. She holds an MSc in Public Administration and Policy from the London School of Economics. Please help me welcome Professor Greenberg.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here with you today.
Okay. Professor, whenever you're ready, take us away.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with everyone today. And I have a tremendous passion for this topic in this area of research and teaching. And I do all of the above. I do research in this topic. We'll talk about that. Teaching of graduate students and some undergraduate previously, and do a lot of commentary and work with policymakers. So let's get started. Implementing ethical AI, otherwise known as artificial intelligence. And next slide, please. So AI-based technologies are helping us solve complex problems in nearly every discipline and industry. And there is a lot of good that has come and can come from AI. But AI technologies also have the capacity to be harmful to us in ways that we may not predict or intend, kind of the law of unintended consequences. Designing AI technologies that benefit society is a tremendous challenge. And as a member of the executive team and incoming chair for Good Systems, which is one of the UT Grand Challenges that President Fenves started, that is our grand challenge, designing AI technologies that benefit society. Next slide. So Good Systems, a UT Grand Challenge, designing AI technologies that benefit society. Our mission is to mobilize human AI networks that address the needs and values of society. And I know that's a lot of words. So we really want to ensure that human is kept at the center, that people are kept at the center, that technologies assist humans and put humans in the center and people in the center, and implications for people and for society at the center of what we're doing. And that means that we have to incorporate the needs and values of society. A few years ago, when I was really starting on this work, I had the opportunity to get a grant from the Cisco Foundation, not the food company, but Cisco in Silicon Valley, with a colleague of mine. And with that funding, we really started delving into the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. And we spent a couple of years on that research. We did semi-structured interviews with folks who were developing AI technologies, both in academia and in industry at corporations. We interviewed policymakers at the local, state, and national level, and even some international. And we interviewed lawyers who were working in this area, lawyers who were in private practice, and lawyers who were in academia, and lawyers who were working for corporations. And from this, we found some notable trends that continue today. One was that many times people who are developing the artificial intelligence, those actual developers, do not see as part of their role the implications, right? It's just we're tech, we're experts in technology, we're developers, we develop it. But implications, that's not our business or our role. We also see many times that policymakers have a somewhat limited understanding of what is a very technical area of artificial intelligence, but yet they're trying to develop policies around it, or need to understand that perhaps there should be policies around implementing, let's say, in a city government. And then we find that lawyers can be very focused on just the legal outcomes or implications, but not what that means for people in society. So for instance, you may find that a lawyer is very focused on artificial intelligence and what that could mean for liability, legal liability. That was what we found most of all. So as a consequence of that particular couple of years of research, we really focused in on how could we have more ethical AI, what would be the implications of implementing it? And we asked all three of those groups, did you have anything in your education about the ethical implications and values and implementation of AI? And all of them said almost, we'll say almost 99% of all three groups of the developers, the policymakers, and the lawyers said no. And we said, well, do you think you should? And almost all of them said, yes, we think we should. So clearly there is a role for education at all levels, but particularly at an institution such as the University of Texas at Austin, whether we're working with teaching an undergraduate or master's or PhDs, for the ethical implications of artificial intelligence. And this is not just confined to one set of students or teaching. If we think about as I said, the broad depth and breadth of artificial intelligence now, and we'll be talking about that more, this should be, I think, in the education for everyone, whether you're in government or engineering or liberal arts or any of our areas. I think really this should be a foundational part of our education. And that should continue again for master's students and PhD students. So, and we have started some of that here at UT Austin. So I'm very pleased that we are now seeing courses at all levels that are multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, that are beginning to incorporate this in the education. Next slide. So why did we start this grand challenge, the good systems? As I said, AI is in our lives, but we believe that people and I can work better together than in isolation, that there are strengths and weaknesses that both the technology has and that humans have. And there are also these unintended consequences. That the technologists who develop AI do not always fully consider the possible ethical and societal implications of their designs. And as I said, laws can then be, and policies can be very reactive, that lawmakers and policymakers, cannot always understand the implications of laws and policies and regulations. So we want to ensure that advances in AI are compatible and responsive to the needs and values of society. Next slide. What is our strategy? Define, evaluate, build. So define. Human values are different across individuals and groups of people, and they change over time. So what does it mean for a system that uses AI technology to be good? What does good mean? Evaluate. For any system that includes AI technology, we ask, how do we decide if it is good or not, good or bad? And build. To understand the impacts of systems incorporating AI technology, good systems projects investigate how can we best build good systems, those that incorporate the values and needs of people in society. Next slide. We started with Good Systems with some one-year projects that were funded through the Vice President of Research through Good Systems. So these are examples. We had AI Austin Housing Analysis. That was an analysis of housing affordability trends in the last 30 years in the city of Austin. We had Urban Health Risk Mapping. It used crowdsourced data and AI to predict census tract level health outcomes for 10 cities. We had Optimize EMS Response. This developed an algorithm to improve EMS response time by 88 seconds here in the city of Austin. And we had AI Equity and Homelessness, a project that I was the principal investigator on, and I'm still continuing research in that area that we can talk about. And we were using AI and big data to empower individuals experiencing homelessness to assist agencies. And these one-year projects and then some core research projects that I'll talk about were the result of a very exciting partnership with the city of Austin. With Good Systems in our work, not only are we multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary across campus, but also with other universities, with other entities, and with the city of Austin. A couple of years ago, before COVID, right before COVID, we had a workshop at UT with faculty and researchers from UT and with staff from the city of Austin. And this workshop was really to see how we could come together and co-develop projects. And we did that and are still doing that. We had a second workshop that was virtual. And all of this too is made easier by an interlocal agreement that was signed a few years ago between the University of Texas at Austin and the City Council of the City of Austin, that for research between the City of Austin and UT Austin makes it much more timely. Instead of spending months and months and months on contracting, with the interlocal agreement, we have something in place for a matter of a few weeks. Researchers and city staff can get together, define the scope, sign an agreement under the interlocal agreement and proceed. So that's been quite helpful too. Next slide. These are core research projects that we now are in the second year of with Good Systems. And these are multidisciplinary projects with faculty and researchers across UT from many different departments who are working on these core research projects. They're funded for 3 with another 3-year renewal, so it should be 6 years total funding. We have, and you will see that these are very much in the realm of implementing artificial intelligence and implementing artificial intelligence in an ethical and good manner. So AI and racial justice. Certainly, we know that there are many implications for equity and in all respects with artificial intelligence. When we're dealing with algorithms, if you think about it, the algorithms are only as good as the data that we're inputting. Yes, we have machine learning, and we can talk about, and we will, generative AI towards the end of this presentation, but still the basis is the information, the data that we put in, right? So if the data that you're putting in is biased, then what you're going to have as far as your artificial intelligence and the outcomes will be biased, will be inequitable. So with AI and racial justice, that project is looking at many of these areas. And this comes about in so many ways if you think about it. Just to speak nationwide, we've seen issues with facial recognition and racial profiling in police departments, for instance. And again, with the artificial intelligence not being very accurate, frankly, with women and with people of color. We have seen issues with some areas such as housing, right? And equity in applying for housing and the use of artificial intelligence. We have seen other areas too. When we were working, as I said, my colleague and I on some of our foundational research with the funding from the Cisco Foundation, we had about 5 different case studies that we used when we were interviewing those developers and policymakers and lawmakers. So we looked at, for instance, AI and the court system, right? And what that would mean for sentencing. And we've certainly seen inequities there. Another case study we had was with AI and waiting lists to receive transplants, right? Whether it was a lung or a heart, certainly you could see inequities there. So these are and you could see racial inequities in all of these areas. So this is a very important area. Being watched is another one that certainly deals with implementation and how we do so in an ethical manner. And that is because we all know that a lot of artificial intelligence now is embedded in everything. So all of us are being watched. And if you think you're not, contact me later. But your phones, your laptops, if you use, Alexa, so many different devices, right? And beyond that, we know that you may be in stores that have cameras. You may be in public right-of-way where we have cameras. There are different types of drones being deployed. So this is another very important area as far as how do we implement, right, AI, and how do we do this in a good manner. Curbing disinformation. Of course, disinformation is a topic I would say daily among many people. And I do want to talk about the difference between disinformation and misinformation. You'll see both terms. Misinformation would be when I pass along information that is wrong, but I don't know that and I have no malice, right? Disinformation is I know the information is wrong. I intend to pass along information that's wrong. I intend that there be malice. So it's a very different situation. So disinformation is an area where we have a lot of research right now. And of course, this gets into many areas of implementation, right? How do corporations, right, use information? And what are they doing with artificial intelligence? Is artificial intelligence generating disinformation that then is spreading? We see this, of course, very much a topic with the social media companies. We'll talk about that more and what's going on in court and in Congress and in legislatures. So disinformation we see in the corporate realm, whether it's the social media companies or other companies. Of course, we can see disinformation in government if there are folks who intend to, spread information that's not correct for specific, should we say, political or other reasons. And there can be nonprofits. There can be interest groups that spread disinformation, the information they know is wrong, but again, they have a motive. And of course, we see foreign entities, countries, and agents spreading disinformation. So how do we, look at implementation of AI as it relates to information and importantly, then disinformation? Smart cities is another area and one in which I have done a lot of work over the past decade. I used to teach a course called What is a Smart City? Because we look at smart as not just the latest, shiny toy in technology. We look at smart as also how do we best improve the quality of life for all of our residents, no matter their socioeconomic status, no matter their ethnicity, their origin, their race. So smart cities we use in an inclusive manner, but certainly with cities, we see AI being used in many ways. There may be sensors in the roads. There may be cameras at stoplights. So there are many ways in which cities are using technology that has AI embedded, and there can be great benefits, right? But also, again, we're talking about a city. How does a city ensure that it has the policies and the implementation plans that are necessary for these technologies, whether they are cameras or drones or sensors, or Q&A chatbots that are implemented in a way that is ethical. Living and working with robots, UT has a major center of robotics and living and working with robots, developing exciting technologies and piloting one such as a robot that would deliver snacks in certain areas of campus, and watching the interaction with the human and the robot. So many people already have robots in their home. They may not think of it that way, but if you have one of those little vacuum cleaners, right, you may have a robot in your home. So many people are already living and working with robots. There are also, of course, manufacturing plants, factories that we see, whether it's auto or others, that have, in fact, some robots that are, delivering maybe to other people and parts of the plant some heavy machinery, for instance. So we are living and working with robots. How do we implement that in a way that is good, that assists the humans, right? And then smart hand tools. This is a project in which I am one of the principal investigators. And this really is about hand tools, handheld tools. Think, I don't know, a jackhammer, think somebody welding, right? And this project was one we had started thinking about during the major storm we had a couple of years ago when the grid went out, and my house was out of power and heat and internet for about a week. When it finally came back, I'm in an old neighborhood, and I was sitting looking out the window, and I saw some very dedicated employees from Austin Energy working on the lines, and I thought, this is really dangerous. We need people and humans doing this stuff. We're not trying to replace humans. We don't want to do that. We don't want to replace people. We want to augment and make their work better and easier, right? So how do we do that? So could we have embedded sensors and feedback and things to assist with a hand tool, or to give feedback on better processes or safer ways? And if you think about a welder, right, with that whole helmet and visor, you could have information that's helping them that they can see. You could have extra safety. You could have training, because it is very dangerous to learn. And we have many occupations, and I'll talk about this more as an example of the future of work, where smart hand tools could be very helpful. Next slide. So values, I've mentioned values, and I've listed a few here that we frequently speak of. Transparency, right? Is the artificial intelligence, is what we're doing with it, is how we're implementing, is it transparent? Is it something that we at least rationally can be aware of? And many times you will see entities that say, well, we're transparent. If you download this and you read the 40 pages of fine print, you will know what we're doing, right? I don't personally consider that to be a beacon of transparency. So truly transparent. Privacy. There are real issues with privacy, right? If you're a worker, you want to know, do I own this data, or does the company, for instance? Privacy is part of our personal information. Healthcare, we know that we have HIPAA, but many areas where we would want to ensure privacy. Equity, that we just spoke of, is very important, and trust. You have to have transparency and accountability. I think privacy and equity before you have what we call trustworthy AI, trustworthy artificial intelligence, which is very important. To use this for good, people have to have trust. So these are some of the values that we speak of. Next slide. Every sector, as I've alluded to, is using this. The private sector, the public sector, nonprofit sector, academia, we're all using artificial intelligence in our daily communications, right? And in many other ways. It could be in research. It could be in online shopping websites, right? It could be nonprofits in their research or their advocacy, and all across academia. We also are using artificial intelligence, either in our daily lives as academics, but many of us in our research also. Next slide. So the good and the bad. You can say, well, what's good and what's bad? And yes, something that we are working on in our research, of course, is defining these terms, right? We've talked about privacy, equity, transparency, trust, good, bad. But I think that there are some case studies, I'll call them, that kind of come to the forefront. If we think about advances in disease and detection and treatment, artificial intelligence has had some wonderful breakthroughs there in either being able, the artificial intelligence, to go through more information than humans ever could, than people who are doctors or researchers ever could, figure out what a disease is, and then look for a treatment. But another one that I think, people have said this is a bad outcome would be, for instance, the racial profiling that we talked about, a consequence of artificial intelligence that perhaps was not, as I say, ready for prime time, and was identifying people as committing crimes who in fact had not committed those crimes. Next slide. The future of work is something that I mentioned, and it's a term that we see frequently now. And it really gets to what jobs will there be in the future? How will we work, right? Will we work remotely? Will we work hybrid? When we talk about what jobs will there be, there are some jobs that may not be as numerous. Proofreading, for instance, we have seen for years that is an area where we see artificial intelligence used, and no longer see people doing the proofreading. On the other hand, we are seeing big increases in those who have the ability not just to develop the artificial intelligence technology, but know how to implement it, know how to do visualizations. Healthcare, yes, there have been changes. Could we potentially have robots who are assisting with home health and lifting those people who need assistance without a caregiver having back issues? Yes, that would be helpful, and that would not eliminate the caregiver, but be helpful to the caregiver. Where will we work? We have seen that evolving and continuing to evolve. I think there was a time where almost everyone, or the majority of people, were working outside of the home. Not everyone, but the majority. Some people were working from home, some may have been hybrid, but the majority were working from home. Then with COVID, we saw that completely turn around, with many people, not everyone, but many people working from home. Now we have been seeing a transition, and we have seen this at UT, right? We are typically teaching in person. Some events, though, are in person. Some events are via Zoom, as this one is, which enables many people, frankly, to participate who may not have been able to otherwise. I certainly found with my teaching that I can still incorporate Zoom and perhaps have the opportunity to have speakers from other parts of the country who I wouldn't have, or do an event like this where we can have people who wouldn't be able to attend because they're not in Austin. So I think we're seeing a continuation of hybrid in our work and in our teaching. In the corporate world, I think that conferences have come back, but not entirely. Some are still doing virtual or hybrid, but I think a lot of companies that used to, for instance, fly employees across the country for a workshop may only do that once a year, and now have some virtual workshops for their employees. So we're seeing a combination. We are seeing some companies who have said everyone must be back in person, but we have seen others that have adopted the hybrid, certain days in the office, certain days at home, or 3 days in, 2 days at home. Because there have been big implications, for instance, for childcare, and that remains a big issue. So with smart tools, as an example from one of our core projects, what does that mean for the future of work? Well, we are looking at ways to assist people, not replace them, but assist them. And one of the things that we have seen is that there is a real dearth, when we talk about supply and demand, there has been a much greater demand than supply for many years in the United States and in Austin for what we call middle skill workers. And in fact, about, 6 years ago, the city of Austin, along with Austin Community College, the Chamber, and some nonprofits, did a big study. And even then was saying Austin does not have enough of middle skill workers. So who are middle skill workers? Middle skill workers need more than a high school education, but not a 4-year degree. So they may graduate from high school and go to get a technical certification, or go to Austin Community College, for instance, and get certified or get a 2-year degree. And this can be everything from welders to plumbers to technicians. So this has only grown over the past few years. The demand for and lack of supply of people who are these middle skill workers. And with smart tools, what we're looking to do is increase this workforce. With the smart tools, you could enable this as a possibility for people who maybe didn't think that they had the strength or technical abilities to do these kinds of jobs. We see the workforce aging. You could enable people to be in the workforce later. We could see it more equitable as far as people of color who may not have been in these middle skilled jobs before. And of course, young people who we need to enter these middle skilled jobs. So with smart tools, the goal is to, again, assist those middle skill workers and increase the supply. Next slide. So I mentioned in passing some of the jobs. What will there be? So some of the jobs that we've seen lost, as we say, or decreasing. Call centers, right? Because we're not typically speaking with humans anymore in call centers. Drivers, we could see a decrease in drivers if we have drones and robots that are doing deliveries, or autonomous vehicles. Actually, we could see some decrease in doctors and lawyers with some of the abilities of artificial intelligence to be doing, as we said, some of this research, whether it's legal research or research regarding diseases and treatments. But jobs gained. We, for instance, expect to continue seeing and already seeing, and these are just examples, increases in technicians, data scientists, telehealth, to just name a few. Next slide. Now, the topic du jour, the topic of the day, generative AI. The future is here. So what do we mean? Well, ChatGPT, this one has been a real headline grabber for several months. And with ChatGPT, you can get on the ChatGPT app and you can experiment with this yourselves. But this is artificial intelligence that is creating all kinds of documents and we should say in research for people. You can ask ChatGPT questions and it will give you answers. But beyond that, we see, and we'll get to this more, students using ChatGPT perhaps to write papers. We see ChatGPT being used by researchers. We see individuals in their daily lives. And we have even seen some members of Congress testing out GPT to write legislation, for example. We are seeing Microsoft and Google right on the heels of ChatGPT enter this race for, I'll call it the generative AI. And we've also seen some big increases in using artificial intelligence in the arts, right? to generate art, to generate music, different art forms and different types of arts. And I've listed several of those below, the last three, of uses of AI or generative AI. So generative, the AI is actually generating, whether it's generating a term paper or a policy document or something for you in your work or something that you're searching for, or it's generating music or visual art or poetry. So the future is here. We are seeing that now, and there's a real race that has commenced. Next slide. So these are just a few headlines when we speak of ChatGPT and all the generative AI. Is this the week AI changed everything? This was the Atlantic magazine online, February 9th, 2023. Higher education will have to adapt to generative AI, and that's a good thing. This was in the Center for Data Innovation, January 17th, 2023. So the first one, is this the week that AI changed everything? Speaking of generative AI and all of these different applications, the higher ed one is saying there are good uses for generative AI. It's not going away. You're going to have to adapt in your teaching and in academia. So that's I would say, the theme of that one. Next, the generative AI race has a dirty secret. Wired magazine, February 18th, 2023. That's an enticing title. I'll just let you read it for yourself. The next one, a conversation with Bing's chatbot left me deeply unsettled. New York Times, February 17th, 2023. These are some I'm just going to let you read for yourselves with very interesting titles here. And then, as ChatGPT's popularity explodes, U.S. lawmakers take an interest. Reuters, February 13th, 2023. And that one is a good segue into my next part of the discussion and finishing up at my next slide, which is, what will this mean for social and political implications? How do we implement AI? And how do we talk about the social and political implications when we implement AI? What does this mean in our daily life? We've talked about that in work, in education, in public policy, and in rules and regulations. Next slide. So thank you very much. I have really enjoyed being able to speak with you about a topic that I have a great passion for, and I welcome your questions and dialogue.
Thank you so much. This is Patricia, and I've got a few questions that I've just jotted down listening to your presentation, and thank you again for being here. It was wonderful.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so if our listeners and our viewers have some questions, you can drop those in the Q&A, and we'll look at those and we'll get those answered. But to start us off, you've talked a little bit here and there about regulations and policy. So, what is your take on how and when policymakers will take on the idea of developing regulations and policies with AI?
Patricia, that's a great question. And I think we need to step back just a little to social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because this discussion really begins with social media. And we know that the social media companies are using a lot of artificial intelligence. But when we saw at the outset of social media development, the beginning of Facebook and others, the argument of these companies was, we're startups and we should not have the type of regulation that media has, that you will see with newspapers or TV media or radio, that we are not media, and we should not be regulated in the way that you see the regulation of media. So Section 230, it's called, they were excluded from the regulation that we see of what we'll call the media companies. And, I think very quickly after we saw this legislation enacted, people started to think, oh, is this a good thing? Because these companies quickly rose from startups to major corporations, right? Mm-hmm. As they are today. And the thinking is, well, they're not startups that need to be protected. And many people believe they are media, just as other companies are, and should not have that exclusion. So this is a hot topic, and one that I think, you know, the courts are taking up in the Supreme Court. We'll see what happens with that. But it is one that I will tell you, I personally do not think that they should be excluded anymore, because I don't know how you could really define media and exclude the social media companies today. So if we go then from talking about the exclusion that they have, and look now at some of the further applications we're seeing and artificial intelligence, I do think that we are seeing and will continue to see, particularly at the local level, city governments looking at and devising actual policies. If they're not, they may not be ordinances, or regulations, but actual policies for how we're implementing AI in cities. What can you use drones for? How is that data stored, right? How is camera data stored? How can you use AI to actually assist people better in emergencies? How would you implement that? So I think there are so many use cases that we see, for instance, in city government and state and federal, but particularly I think at the local level, whether you're a city, a county, a school district. So how can we use it for good and in ethical ways? And how do we formulate policies that we have in place? Now, with generative AI and chat GPT, I think we are seeing a renaissance at the federal level in Congress of looking at, again, Section 230, at do we need to have actual laws in place and regulations in place regarding social media, but also around AI and generative AI. This is something that just recently policymakers and policymakers in Congress have certainly turned their attention to.
Cool. We do have some questions coming in now, so I'm going to jump to those.
Okay.
The first one is, Good Systems has done a great job of enunciating the crucial issues. Do you have any anxiety that technology will develop so rapidly? So the idea of chat GPT, and so that we can't really keep up with what's being developed?
I think that's been a case throughout history, right?
Yeah.
And I think that we will be able to do research alongside it, the technology and the advances that we're seeing. And as I said, if you think back, that's been the case throughout society. There have been technologies that were very dislocating at the time, whether it was the printing press, right? Mm-hmm. Or various farm equipment. When we first had email, years ago, there was the term e-government, electronic government. And I wrote a piece saying, there is no e-government, right? There is government, and these are tools. We didn't talk about, telegraph government. We didn't talk about telephone government. Why are we talking about e-government? No, these are tools. We still have government. We still have governance. And so I do think that researchers globally are working alongside, and that we will be able to continue to do so, just as we've seen historically. Yes, technology is moving faster, it's more complicated, but we certainly have much greater capabilities, nationally and globally than we did when we saw the advance of the printing press.
So we have two questions that are kind of related to each other. So what happens if there are some good and some bad in an AI application? So is it possible to designate a threshold? And if it is, how do you determine it? And kind of the second question is similar, is there a potential for bad actors to hack into an AI program that was created for wholesome purposes, and what type of security needs to be developed to prevent? Yeah.
Okay, so yes, and yes, we have seen with all of these technologies for years now, hackers, some who are pranksters and some who may be, I don't know, foreign actors, right? So this issue is of paramount importance. Regardless of what we're seeing today with ChatGPT or anything else, this has been an ongoing issue. Cyber security is of paramount importance, and it is something we must continue to work on. Again, if we speak of cities, the city of Atlanta was an unfortunate poster child for ransomware a few years ago. A major city shut down. So I do really stress cybersecurity, and we do have certainly, and it wasn't one of the issues that I spoke of, and frankly, I should have, that cybersecurity is of paramount importance. And we certainly do have researchers at UT, nationwide, again, globally, who are, as part of implementation of AI, working on cybersecurity. Could you have good and bad? Yes, I think that's possible. And it is certainly incumbent upon us to be hyper vigilant for the bad and on a daily basis. This has been a huge issue, as we know, with the social media companies, right? How, should they monitor? Are they monitoring? How are they monitoring content that the preponderance of people would consider to be very bad? If it's pedophiles, for instance, right? How are they doing what they need to be monitoring that which we would consider bad, along what we would consider good, such as alerting people in emergency? So these are ongoing issues, and the cybersecurity and the security measures and having the people dedicated to this is of paramount importance. Whether you are in academia or any level of government, you're a nonprofit, you're a corporation, you must have the people dedicated to this also.
Great answer. I do believe that too. There's these two questions are kind of related as well, but I'm going to ask them separately. So some researchers seem to feel that training AI with vast amounts of data is the only necessary condition to ensure ethical behavior results from the AI systems, without needing any hard-coded laws or rules in place. I think I know what your thoughts are, but I would like you to answer that. Do you, he mentions, think Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, and what are your thoughts? And I think Joy is the person who answered that. That's a great question. Thank you, Joy.
It's a terrific question. And yes, you probably do know my thoughts. When I talked about the research that I started with a colleague a number of years ago with the funding from Cisco on the ethical implications of AI, certainly it is my belief and our belief that technology alone is not enough, that you must have humans in the loop, that you must have people who are vigilant, and those people must have training, right? Because as I said, we found with the developers and the policymakers and the lawyers, the 3 groups that we were interviewing, that they didn't really have the training and the education, and that this must be ongoing. And yes, I do believe that we do need policies. The European Union has policies. In the United States, we're talking about policies, but I do believe that we need the technology and policies working side by side to have the ethical implementation, and you have to have both side by side. And those policies can take different forms. You could have, as I said, at a local level, you could have an ordinance or a city council resolution, or you could just have policies internal to the city. If you look at corporations can have policies. Whether or not they're enforced has become a rather large topic, and I think that's where we see perhaps a need for rulemaking at the federal level or some regulation. Or there was a proposal I had with a colleague that we submitted a couple of years ago to form at the federal level an advisory council with folks from all walks of life and different disciplines to be advising on, for instance, rules and rulemaking in this area. So there are various forms that you can imagine, but I think that we need both technological solutions, human solutions, people, and policies.
Great answer. So this one is kind of fun. This is from Craig Wheeler, and he says, I think virtually no credible people think that our current AI is conscious. So do you have any thoughts on whether that will happen?
Well, I do agree with you, Craig. I know that there was an individual and an article that was circulated some months ago claiming that the AI was conscious. I think most people disagree with that. I disagree. I do not think that AI is conscious now, and the experts that I know agree with me. AI is not sentient now. AI is not conscious. Could it ever reach that state? When you don't know the answer to a question, just say, I don't know. I don't know. I go round and round with myself on that one as to whether I believe that it could ever reach that state of consciousness. It certainly is not now. And I have some doubts whether that can ever really be achieved. However, I did read a lot of science fiction growing up.
One more question for you. This goes back to the kind of education and how education is going to have to evolve. How do you think AI will shape a future student's experience? So 10 years in the future, 15 years in the future, what do you think will change for the student and the educational experience?
Well, we're already seeing this. And I'm glad that somebody asked that question, so I have an opportunity to talk about it a little more. We are already seeing this as a very big topic with the as soon as Chat GPT arrived on the scene a few months ago, whether it's teachers in middle school or college professors. What does this mean for the term paper or for the essay or others? Are you going to just allow students to use this? Are you going to have them write everything in the classroom? Are you going to just see this as another tool? These are big questions, and folks are trying to address this now in real time. I would say all of this is developing in real time, but I think that there are big questions on that end, particularly for research and writing, that we're asking of students. Is there a different standard, or are you having it done in the classroom, right? And then there are other implications that we need to continue to examine. How can this be of great assistance in our teaching, right? And having a better, more interesting teaching experience in classroom and asynchronous outside the classroom. How can this assist us in our research? And this is ongoing. This is real time. You can get online right now and see all kinds of discussions at UT and every other university, as well as middle school teachers.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Greenberg, for joining us today. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with Texas Exes, and it was a real pleasure talking with you. So we appreciate your time.
Oh,
and
thank you. I enjoyed it immensely.
Cool. So we also want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much for attending our talks. We're excited to welcome everyone back to the Alumni Center for our March lecture. And the title of that is it the flu, allergies, or COVID? Deciphering Your Symptoms in 2023. That lecture will be held on Tuesday, March 21st with Dr. Renee Acosta from the College of Pharmacy. You can register now at texasexes.org/lunchtime lectures. Thank you, everyone. Y'all have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.